Welcome back to my channel Code Dictator. Follow my channel and subscribe, like and hit share button with your friends. In this topic we are going to learn about methods. So what is method? In the previous chapter we learned about sequences, statement and looping. So basically sequences is what? The sequence of statement. But what if we have repetition of all the sequence or the same statement? So we can group together all the statement together into one specific method, or we can just group them into the specific somewhere. So that we are calling it as a method. So how to create a method? So basically method having few parts. So the important part is like, before that you can give any modifiers, access modifiers like private, public, protected or default. Then method, compulsory, each and every method having their own return type. And if that method is not returning any value, so you can make it as a void, but at least you have to mention that keyword void. And then you have to specify method name. But here we already learned about the naming conventions. So as per the naming convention rule, we have to follow camel case while we are defining the method name. And in the parenthesis we can pass number of parameters. So how many number of parameters I want to pass to my method, that is called the parameter of your specific method. That can be any number of parameters or any type of parameters. And then important part of method is what? Method body. So there you can specify all the sequence or all the statements. This is all about method, but the important thing is what? How to call that method. So as we already learned about a different type of like static keyword. So static keyword we can apply on method, variable, class or static block. So if we are making our method as a static, so you can call your method without creating object of that class. But if your method is non-static and if you are trying to call your non-static method into the static method, so that time compulsory you have to create object of the class, and with the help of that object only you can call your method. That is the primary rule of static. So when it's come to the method calling, so basically there are two different ways. So first one is what? Like method returns some value. So at this time your method is having any specific return type, but sometimes your method is not returning anything, so that is your returning nothing. So basically it is returning void, means it is returning nothing. The process of method calling is super easy. Like whenever your program invokes a method, the program control gets transferred to that called method. So where that method I want to call, that it will jump your process to that called method. So don't worry, we are going to do it practically as well, and I will represent that how it works internally. And when my called method returning that control to my calling method, so there are two different conditions. So first is what? Whenever my method encounters the return statement, so it will return some value or it will return nothing, but it will, that whenever it is getting return keyword, so that time it will return the control of execution to my calling method. Or the another is like whenever it reaches to the end of your closing parenthesis, so there it will automatically terminate the execution of that specific method and it returns the control to the calling method. So we'll learn a lot of things about data types, like we have primitive data types or non-primitive data types like objects or array, list, or like primitive data types like your int, bool, character. But there is another specific keyword, that is void. So void is specifically apply whenever you want to return nothing. So you can't write it simply null. So you can write it as a void. So if you don't want to return anything, you can simply write it as a void. So my method is not returning anything. So if you see the example like system out println, the println is a method of your system class. So that println method, return type of println method is void. It is not returning anything. It is simply doing the task, like it is printing on the console. Or if you see the another example, so here like int result equal to sum 8, 5. So basically 8 and 5, that is your parameters which is type integer, and the sum is basically the method, and we are calling sum method. So this is like calling your method, and that sum method is returning some integer value. That's why we are going to store that integer value inside the int data type of result. So let's take a small example. So at the right hand side, if you see, we have one small program. So that is like public static int add. So public is basically your access modifier, and very soon we are going to talk on that. But public is basically that access is available throughout your application. So that's why the access modifier is public. Static is your access specifier, so which is specifying more access related to your specific method. So like that method is allowed, like where it is allowed, like to who, like who can call that method. And int is basically the return type of your method, that the method is going to return some int type of primitive values. Or add is the method name, so it has to be some specific naming convention or meaningful name. And that add method is going to take two different parameters. So first one is your int a and int b, both are your primitive int data type. So in that we are going to create a local variable which is sum, and then we are performing some arithmetic operation, and after that arithmetic operation we are returning that value with the help of return statement. So basically return is a keyword which is specifying that this value is going back to my call method. So where my method is calling, so it is going to store in that specific variable. So let's perform the same example practically. So guys, in the practical example we are going to create one new class, new and class. If you are not aware with how to create a class, so please follow my lecture. There I explain about how to create class and how to create methods or how to access main method. So method demo, and the package structure is same. Click on finish. So in that we are going to create our first method called public. So public is basically your access modifier, static is your access specifier, and your return type of method, so which is int, and the method name add. And then you can pass your parameters. So basically parameters are like n number of parameters. You can pass 0 argument, or you can pass n number of argument, or n different type of arguments. So in this example we are performing addition of two primitive type number. So that's why we are taking it as int a comma int b, and in the parenthesis we are going to perform addition of two numbers. So we are going to create one local variable called int sum, and initially we are allocating the value. So if you not yet completed with my variable section, so please go there and follow that section. So here we are going to perform some arithmetic operation, sum equal to a plus b, and then we are going to return the value. If you see here, we are getting one error, that is basically exception. So exception is what? This method must return a result of type int, because my method is not returning any return statement. It is expecting that we are going to return some int type of data, but we are not returning now. So what we can do, we can simply use return keyword, and then we can return any value. So we can either return 0, or we can return 10, or we can return any value, but which is int data type. So our sum is basically a int data type variable. So we are returning that sum value, and now we are going to create one main method. So we already knows how to create main method and how it works. So simply, if you see here, as I already told you that method is a static. So whenever your method is a static, so no need to create object of your class. So whenever you are calling static method inside another static method, so no need to create any object. Or even though the method is static, called method is static, and calling method is non-static. So that time also you can directly call that method without creating any object. So simply I'm going to create calling that method. So int sum equal to add, and I'm going to pass two parameters 10 comma 20. Here it is. So without creating any object, I'm calling my method. But if you notice one thing, if I remove this static keyword, what will happen? Let's see. So now I'm getting one compile time exception. That exception is cannot make static reference to the non-static method add. Yes, correct, because our main method is a static. So our calling method is a, so from the method where we are going to call our method, that is static, and our add method is a non-static. So definitely for that we have to create object of our class. So method demo m equal to new method demo, and with the help of that object we can call our method. Time for mistake. If you see here, I created one object, and with the help of object I am going to call my method. And if I run this example, let's see what happened. Yeah, so basically we are not printing that statement, so let's add the print statement sys out and sum. Here it is. So if you run your example, here it is our value as expected output. But if you remove this int as a void, and if you are keeping this return statement, so that time it will give one exception. That is what? Void method cannot return any value. Exactly, our method is void. Like basically I am just explicitly telling that my method is not returning anything, but still I am trying to return something. So that's why it is giving me an compile time exception. So basically if you want to avoid it, this is not a good practice. If you are simply writing the return, you can write it, but it is not a good practice. Yeah, but whenever you are returning something, so after that if you are writing some any other statement like sys out after return, and I'll just copy this statement and I'll call this one before the return, before return. So if you see, I'm getting another compile time exception, unreachable code. So exactly, once your method or once your program is getting this keyword, return keyword, so whatever you are writing after that specific keyword, that will be your unreachable code until unless it is not inside any condition. So that's why this is not allowed here. We have to remove that line. And if you see here, my method is not returning anything, so type mismatch, cannot convert from void to int. So basically it is telling me that, hey, you are trying to return something, like you are expected that your method is going to return something, but your method is returning int, and expected is your method is returning void, and expected is int. So this is not well format, so you have to just simply remove that statement. So I remove that one, and then what I will do, I'll just write the statement over here plus sum. So because I am not returning anything, any value, so that's why I want to write my statement inside the calling method. If I run the example, it's giving me exactly the same output. So guys, you can follow my GitHub account like Code Dictators. There you will get all source code related to applications. And very soon we are going to discuss about passing parameter by value. So passing parameter by value means what? If you see here at the right hand side, here it is, we have like int a and int b. So basically int a and int b, that is what the value which we are going to pass in our method. So that's why it is called passing parameter by values. And Java is call by value. So what is the difference between call by value and call by reference? Very soon we are going to look into that. So before that, let's understand how method works internally. So this is what my stack memory. So initially I created one method public void m1, that is what my method name, and which is having one local variable a. So if you see that m1 and a both are stored into the stack memory, and then I called another method which is m2, and I am passing one parameter, that is 10. So if you see that m1 method don't have any parameter, so you can pass either n number of arguments or 0 argument. And if you see M2 method which is having one parameter, so basically that parameter is a local parameter or local variable, and the scope of that variable is only between that parenthesis of your M2 method. And again with that we created another local variable called C, and that is type of boolean. So both are stored into the stack memory. So when it's come to the local variable, that gets stored inside the stack memory. And at the same time I'm going to call method M3. So if you look into that properly, so my control flow, it started from method M1, then that control flow moved to the M2, and from the M2 it moved to the M3. So until unless the execution of M3 is not executed completely, it will never come back to my M2 method. There are only two scenarios. First, either we are writing any return statement or that execution of method is completed. Here I created one small class which is point, and point is having two different values like int x and int y, and this is private, so definitely we have to make them as a public with the help of some getter and setters. So now in method 3 we are going to create object of our point class. So whenever it's come to the object, so whenever we create new point 10, 20, so whenever it's created, so it gets created inside the heap memory. So one copy of that object is get created into the heap memory, and we are going to create class point and the variable name, basically variable name. So inside the M3 method we are creating one local object, or local object is basically kind of variable, simply we are calling it as an object. So a local object, that scope is only between that M3 method, that both parentheses. And if you see that red line, so means what, like still now we are not allocated any reference to any location, or we are not pointing to any other object which are present inside heap memory. So when we use equal symbol, so that time my reference, like my object will point to my specific reference, like a value which is present inside heap memory. And once the execution of my M3 method is completed, so then it will return that value if that my M3 method is returning anything then, or if it is just returning a void, it is returning nothing. So then it will just simply pass the control to that calling method. So the M2 is calling to my M3. So after completion of M3 execution, that control will return back to my M2 method. And when it will return back, so object will be allocated to it will be basically deallocated, and whatever the value which is present inside my heap memory, that it don't have any reference right now. So basically it is right now ready for the garbage collection, and my short-term garbage collection will collect all that values, or whatever the objects which are present inside heap memory who don't have any references, that will be collected with the help of my garbage collection. So that is the basically one of the biggest feature of my Java, like garbage collection. That support is really it is making my life easy. Personally, I'm telling you that. So then when it's come to the M2 method, so now the M2 is executing its flow, and once the execution of M2 is completed, it will return that control flow to my M1 method. So like that it works. So yeah, right now we will look into that, what is pass by value and pass by reference. So basically pass by reference is what, simply whenever you are passing any references with any method, so the value, that method is locally, it is changing that values, it will affect globally. And the method pass by value means what, whenever you are calling any method and if you are passing any parameter, so that will be considered as a value. So if you are doing or if you are performing any local operations, so it will not affect globally. So yeah, it's really confusing how to understand the things, correct? So Java is basically your pass by value, or basically called by value. So don't worry, we will take one practical example to understand this concept. So here we are going to create one class, new class, call by value demo, and here I'm going to create one main method, and I'm going to create one instance variable. So guys, if you are not still completed with the variable type of variable, so please go and check that session. That link is provided in description, and as well as if you see that icon symbol, so there you can get that reference link. Okay, so we are going to create one instance variable int data equal to, basically we are setting the value as 50, and then I'm going to create one simple method. So that method access modifier, it can be anything, private, public, protected or default. So what is the meaning of default? So if I'm not providing any access modifier, so by default access modifier is a default, that's it. And don't worry, we are going to discuss more about access modifiers very soon. So void change, and it is having one parameter which is int data equal to data plus 10. Okay, so we are performing like adding some new value into that data variable, and then in main method we are going to create object of my class call by value demo, c equal to new call by demo, and then we are going to create some sysout message. So before plus c dot data, and the same thing which is after. But after what? So right now we are going to change that value. We are going to call our method which is change method. So c dot change, and here I'm going to pass as 500. Okay, if I save this example and run this example, so initially value of data is what, 50, and then we are going to call this method. So let's see what will happen. So value as per, if it is reference, call by reference, so that value will become as, so initially if it is call by reference, so the value of my first is what, like 50, and after this it will become like 510 when it is call by reference. But Java is your call by value, so that value initially it is 50, and even though you are performing any local operations, so it will not affect on your output, and it will just keep your data, whatever the previous value was there, it will keep that value. So that is the meaning of call by value.